So again, this is a presentation from the MVP presentation team. Our mission is to basically turn all of you into rock star presenters, whether you are presenting at a major Salesforce event like Dreamforce, a world tour, a user group meeting, or any other type of presentation that you're doing in front of an audience. Because the truth is, regardless of the amount of people in the audience, for many of us, the stress level is quite high, regardless of the content that we're speaking about, the geographic location of where we're speaking, and even the venue in which we're speaking. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Giller. I'm simply the host and the moderator of today's session, and basically introducing this topic of how we go about preparing for an upcoming presentation. We've all been through the experience where someone approaches us saying, hey, by the way, you're an expert in whatever it is having to do with Salesforce. Could you present on a specific topic? And usually our initial response to that is, oh my God, this is going to be freaking cool. I'm going to be the spotlight of attention, the stage will be mine, everyone will be looking at me. This is going to be absolutely wonderful. And usually most of us, after that initial euphoria of, holy cow, everyone will be looking at me, open up your computer, start typing away, and let's get started. I have to do something for this presentation. I have to have something on the screen behind me as I'm speaking. So we open up our computer, we're ready to start typing away, and we feel like everything is gibberish. It's not really coming clear. There are different thoughts, different phrases. We're already starting to think about images. Some of us even start thinking about cool animation or transitions that you're going to have between your slides, even which color scheme to use, which logo to use, and everything starts to fall apart, and it seems a little bit chaotic. And then we start to feel like, oh God, what do I do now? Like, really, where do I start? On the one hand, I have all of these thoughts, I have all of these ideas, I have all of these messages, all of these stories that I want to share, but I'm not entirely sure how to put it all together in a nice, neat, organized way so that I look polished when I'm up on that stage in front of the microphone, or like we are now in a GoToWebinar and sharing my screen. I'm afraid I'm going to get completely lost, and I'll have nothing, and I'll just be babbling away. Well, no surprise that in the end what we really need to do is we need to organize our thoughts. We need to strategize in terms of what is the ultimate goal, what is the message, what is the feeling that we want our audience to walk away with in the end, and we need to plan accordingly. Connecting with our audience is a critical piece, because you know what, just getting up there and talking about the cool project that you worked on or a cool new feature that you became familiar with, no one really gives a damn if you're not connecting with your audience. You have to show how it relates to them, how they can benefit from the information that you're sharing, and that's what they're going to find inspiring. And you need to do all of that without having a panic attack. So that does seem like an overwhelming task in order to get from the panic of the gibberish of loss of words to getting on stage and delivering that message in a nice, clear, and succinct way without stressing out too much, which is why we bring to you the presentation preparation strategies from other Salesforce MVPs. So today I'm joined by Joshua Hoskins, Jody Wagner, and Steve Molis, and of course Phil, who's the facilitator and moderator of this entire series of presentations for you. And without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Josh. So let me go over and make Josh the presenter. Josh, it's all yours.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Let's go ahead or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Let's go ahead and get started. You should see my screen now. So to get started, I thought I'd start out with a quote from Maya Angelou. A couple weeks ago, thanks to Facebook, I found myself participating in an elementary school reunion. Who does that? But it was hosted at my fifth grade teacher's home, and the following day, Mrs. McFarland posted all the pictures that we had taken the day before, along with this quote from Maya Angelou, which pretty much aligns to the presentation skill, or one of them, that I've been practicing for a couple months now successfully. You know, people will forget what you said. Yeah, that's pretty much happened to me. People will also forget what you did. That's all happened to us, I think. But this one point I really had to think about, and it really resonated with me, is people will never forget how you made them feel. And this is something that I've been practicing for the last couple of months, starting out with my talk in Jaipur at Jaipur DevFest. And it's really proven successful for me. And I want to take you through some of the steps that I go through to prepare for my presentations. So in order to focus on how people feel, you got to ask yourself some questions. You really need to ask yourself, well, how do I want my audience to feel? Do you want them to feel confident enough to speak about the topic again? Do you want them to feel knowledgeable enough to make a purchasing decision? Or do you want them to feel satisfied and that they have a complete and comprehensive understanding to take whatever you say to others? Or last, do you want them to be armed and dangerous, you know, ready to take on and crush their next challenge or obstacle? And so I ask myself all of these items, but to really get the correct answer when you ask yourself these items, you kind of have to know your audience. You need to know, what makes them tick. So I ask my questions about my audience. What do they need? What do they lack? What do they require? What's my message I want to get across? What do they like? What do they appreciate? What do they find helpful? And more importantly, when you're about to take a big stage with a lot of people in the audience, you got to be able to understand what makes them laugh. And the key point is that you want your presentation to be relatable and relevant. So when I start out, I jot down all of my talk track. I'll basically write down, bullet items, not paragraphs, bullet items of all the things that I want to get across, all the items that I think are important. And then I lace in some structure and some foundation. Without a good foundation, it's possible for your talk to crumble because it doesn't have a good foundation, so it just falls apart in the middle. And that's not really good for anyone. After that, I sequence my talking points. And I do this so that I don't lose the audience. Commonly, people will attend your presentation, your webinar, or your speaking session, whatever it be. And the audience will have various levels of understanding of the actual content. So the only way to guarantee that you bring everyone along with you is to tell a story. And I do that by sequencing and building a foundation so that by the end, everyone's sort of understood what exactly, where we started and where we got to with a comprehensive understanding. So after I've sequenced all of my talking points, I do something that people don't think I do very often, is I go to sleep. I don't kid you, like I literally take 24 hours after I build my talking points and I think about it. And this presentation is a great example. So 2 days ago when we did the dry run with Jody and David, my slide over here to the bottom left on your screen is exactly what I had. I was like, guys, piece of cake, I'm gonna present this slide, 5 points, we're gonna build on them, and then I'll pass it off to Jody and we'll be all fine. But one thing that I learned while presenting is David asked me to sort of build it out and create some animation, put some pictures, and I was further inspired, I'm learning too, to talk about it in this way. So basically, after I've had a chance to build on my talking points, sleep on it, wait 24 hours and come back to it, it's all about putting the cherry on the top. And so that's what I feel like I did here. After you've got your talking points, you've finalized your presentation, you've jazzed it up with some feedback from your dry runs, the next thing you want to do is check for success. And what I mean by check for success is, have you set out and have you accomplished everything you set out to do? So have you covered all of your points? Have you taken it a test drive, maybe with David and Jody, and gotten some feedback how to make your presentation more awesome? And if you did, how did it feel? How did it make those people feel when you gave them the dry run? It's a very important question to ask anyone who you may go to, such as my mom or a colleague. I want to be able to say, hey, this is what I'm going to present. What do you think about this idea? How does it make you feel? Why not test with someone who's out of the ecosystem? And then most importantly is, how'd you do on time? The worst thing you could possibly do when you present is go over on time. So you want to be able to make sure that you get enough content in where you leave room for anything that may happen. Demo faux pas, Murphy's in the room, interruptions, or just like audio issues. So you want to be able to make sure that you leave yourself just a bit of slack to be flexible. And then after you've checked for success, finally, this is my favorite moment, what I spent the last 15 minutes doing, is getting in the zone. And sometimes when you're at a conference, it's really hard to get into the zone when you've got so many things going around you. One thing that I make a point of is the last 30 minutes, I focus. I close all of my windows on my computer if I'm doing a webinar. If I'm at a conference, I put my phone in my backpack, I take my iPad, and I go for a walk around the building. Sometimes I come in like 5 minutes, and the person inviting me to speak is kind of like, well, where did you go? Like, are you ready? I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. But I excuse myself from all of the dialogue that's happened so I can really focus. Because I'm thinking about things about how will I enter the stage? How will I exit the stage? What will my first paragraph be? What will be the first things that I say to the audience to capture their attention? And then how do I make sure that I'm not boring? So I'll think about options about, how to make them laugh. How will I infuse energy if I get to my second paragraph and everyone's just got like deer in the headlights? That's important to basically have these things ready to go and be thinking about these items. By the time I've gotten to that, I'm usually getting called on the stage with, welcome to the stage, Joshua Hoskins. So I think these are some tips that have worked for me, and I want to share these with you. And that's all I got.
Josh, thank you. I love, especially with the visuals that you have of the peaceful, what's the word I'm looking for? The peaceful perspective that you get when getting into the zone right before getting on stage, which is absolutely fantastic. And before Jody comes on, I've got one question that came in for you, which is this. When you talked about knowing your audience, knowing the audience's what they need, what they're lacking, their level of expertise, where they're coming from. So what advice do you have when someone is, let's say, presenting for a user group, and let's say you're talking about a new feature that relates to Lightning Experience, and some or maybe even most of the people in the room are still only using Classic. So, okay, it relates to them in some way because it's still Salesforce related, but there's still that disconnect. So my question to you is, what advice do you have to not alienate those people whose need or pain point is slightly off of the main message that you're preparing for your presentation?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. One of the things that I would do is obviously relate it to them, and I would also do my research around the different things that they kind of think are shiny objects, and then I would tie that into bringing them along for the journey, right? Why don't you do a Lightning demo? Why don't you more transition your talk to converting from Aloha or Classic to Lightning? So solve that, one is understanding the challenge, which we've done a great job at in this scenario. But two is figuring out a way to bring those audience people along with the same obstacle that you've identified within your presentation in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And a lot of times that has to do with actually doing a demo, or being able to, if you're bold enough, ask for a real live scenario that you can mock up very quickly, or explain to them how you would execute that scenario so that you relate to them and they get something out of it. They can take away and say, yes, I feel like I understand how to do this, and I'm going to go conquer my next challenge.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome feedback. Thank you, Joshua. Jody, you're up.
Sorry about that. Okay. Can you see my screen?
We see your screen and hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. So Josh and I didn't plan our presentations together, but I also have 5 quick presentation preparation strategies. So, and I guess 5 is the magic number tonight. So one of the things that I like to do, and Josh did hit upon it very quickly, was around writing out your talk track. So one of the things that I do is very much prepare a journey. I want to have the audience come with me on my journey. I want them to follow my story arc so that they understand, you know, the beginning, the middle, the end, you know, what exactly is happening. So I try to write that out. It's not always verbatim, but I do interject like specific points that I really think are important. I also put little placeholders in for where I want to add anecdotes, and I think when you do a presentation, anecdotes are really important because it also makes you, as I think you might hear one more time on this presentation, relatable. So it's really important for me to get what that flow is down and to make sure it comes together in a way so you can follow exactly what's happening. So when I do that, I also then put together slide themes. So when I have my talk track done, I then pair it up with the PowerPoint slides that I've put together. And at this point, I really try to put together a slide for each of the major points that I really want to talk about. Unfortunately, a lot of times we end up putting our slide decks together before we have our full talk track completely laid out. So here's where I might have about 30, 40 slides, and by going through my talk track and my different slide themes, I'm able to whittle down my presentation so I have exactly what I need, because I don't want it to be too long, I don't want too many slides, but I also try to keep my slides simple. So you'll see only a few words here and there. I try to stay away from having walls of text because then people will read your slides as opposed to listening to you. So I try to keep this simple with some slide themes, some basic bullet points, and then the rest of my talk track is what I deliver as we're speaking. So I try at this point to put it all together and whittle that down. Once I've done this, it's time to practice. So we've already heard practice makes perfect. You hear all those different sayings. But honestly, mimic your presentation space. That doesn't mean that if you're presenting at Dreamforce, you have to make Dreamforce at your house. It just means that you want to maybe enlist a friend or family member, speak like as if you are at a podium, you know, actually try to navigate through your computer, definitely practice. If you are someone who likes to walk around when they talk, definitely try doing that. Some of us get a little petrified and we just basically hang on to the podium for dear life. But you want to make sure that you understand exactly how this is going to flow. Also test out your presentation. I know I think David, you mentioned animations. I am an anti-animation person, so I generally don't have those in my presentation. One of the reasons why I don't is because I think the first few times I did that, I forgot and I was like, where's the rest of my text? So you want to try to avoid some of those situations in the moment, and you can do that by either skipping the animations or making sure you've practiced them. And you want to be able to flow, to make sure that you're in the right time category. So if you're only supposed to be speaking for 20 minutes, your presentation isn't 45. That's never going to help. So this is your time to really kind of hone in on what you're trying to do, make sure you have it timed correctly. Also, hopefully your friend or family member can give you feedback, but you can also practice making eye contact and seeing if it actually makes sense. The next one is sometimes a bit of a sticky wicket, to demo or not to demo. In the spirit of full disclosure, I do record live demos sometimes, I record my demos and I'll use QuickTime to do that just because I want to ensure, as a project manager, I want to try to minimize any risks. So I want to make sure that I'm not going to have issues like, you know, the internet going down, which I've seen happen at a demo jam. I want to make sure that something doesn't go awry. I can't log into Salesforce, something crazy happening. So I definitely pre-record my demos. but I've only done it once. But live demos are best. People do like to see what you're doing, and sometimes it gives you a little bit of time to go a little off script. So you might have a little bit of lag while you're trying to do something. You can make a funny joke like, hey, it's just like real life. And if you are one of those brave souls that decides that you're definitely going for it and doing a live demo, bring some screenshots. Have some screenshots just in case you run into one of those issues. You can do the live demo, you can have the screenshots, or you can kind of cheat like me. After you've gone through all of that, you've crafted your presentation, you have everything all set up, you have decided whether or not you're demoing, you've practiced everything, you've gotten it all ready. Now you get to breathe deep and go on stage and nail it. I find this is the hardest part. The other stuff is really easy because you're not in front of other people as you do it, but it's that getting on stage. And I love what Josh had said about, you know, kind of getting your moment of zen there, like taking a pause. Because when you do step on that stage, you need to be confident. You need to have relaxed and confident posture. One of the things that I learned that I found was really interesting is in a survey of TED Talks, hand gestures are really, really important. So definitely keep your hands out in front of you. Don't put them in your pockets. One of the facts that I learned was that 465 hand gestures were the amount of the most hand gestures in the most popular TED Talks. 272 were the least popular. So we really like to see people's hands, apparently. I think that goes back to our prehistoric times when we thought people where we couldn't see their hands might have had a weapon. Hand gestures add 12.5 times more weight to your presentation, and it shows emotion and shows basically how interested you are in delivering the presentation. Another thing that's really important is talk to the audience. Don't talk to your slides. Too many people get really, really nervous, and I am probably one of these people, and have really spent time looking at my computer or at my slides instead of actually connecting with the audience. And a little pro tip here, I try to look for people in the room who are really paying attention and nodding along. Those are the people that I feel like want me to succeed. So I try to make eye contact with those people. I try to make sure they're following along. You can usually tell those people they're really positive about everything you're saying. The last point I think is really important, and I've seen this a number of times. When you come to the end of your presentation, before you ask for questions, end it well, end it strong on that high note. We have a tendency when we're nervous to just ramble. Don't ramble. You know your stuff, you know your presentation, make it through, end it, and then ask if there's any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jody. I have two questions for you. The first one is, actually, I take it back, one question and one comment. So the first question is with regard to leveraging QuickTime recordings for the walkthroughs and screenshots as a backup. Could you share a particular painful experience that you might have had to bring you to that point, or is it just from being a very precautionary person?
I am very precautionary, and I like to tell people that I do things a lot like a cooking show. So I'll show you like the beginning, I'll show you the middle, and I'll show you the end, but I won't show you the entire process. But I did do a presentation at Dreamforce. It was the first time I'd ever spoken at Dreamforce, and I did something really complicated with Process Builder. And I was so afraid I was going to forget a step somewhere and be flustered and really freaked out that I just recorded the whole thing. And while I was recording it, I used my talk track at the same time, so it was timed in exactly the way I was speaking. So if you weren't looking at my hands, you probably thought I was actually really doing it right then and there.
Nice job. I have to tell you from my own approach to doing screen shares, or I'm sorry, doing webinars. Sorry, can't get the words out. Doing a demo is typically I lean towards the opposite. Now I will be embracing your advice because I think it is It is the safer route to take, and there's no need to live life so dangerously. But I will give you guys a story. When I used to be an employee of at NBC Universal, and when at the time GE owned NBC, and when GE purchased Universal and merged it together with NBC, basically I was sent on a plane out to Universal Studios out in California, and one of the many things that I had to do was to train all Universal employees on the corporate GE tools that were now being introduced to them. And one of those tools was called Lotus Same Time, basically an instant messaging app. And
Yes.
I was in an audience with basically all Universal employees, all 5,000 of them at the time were coming in and out for me to do these sessions. And I was showing them live how you can go online. You could see who's live, who's online, who's active, who's not active. You can message people. And of course, there were friends of mine, Universal employees, who were sitting in the room, and they were purposely, as I was facing the audience, focused on my message and getting everyone excited about these tools. There were people in the back of the room who were messaging me like really rude, obnoxious, yet hysterically funny things, and the room would burst out laughing, and I had no idea why, and I would look up behind me and like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing.
Yeah,
So
another thing you can control. People can't really mess with your flow. I will say, I will give you one little caution on doing the QuickTime video. I get razzed a bit and told that I cheat because I do that, but I'm risk averse, so I'm okay with it.
there you go. No, it works. It works. And
As long as you don't do it on a demo jam, you'll be fine.
Right, right. Otherwise, you'll get disqualified in the demo jam. So the next item I have for you is actually a comment extrapolating from one of the items that you touched on, one of your bullet points, which is talking to the audience and not to the slides. The piece of advice that one of my managers once gave me is, if everything you're going to say during a presentation is already written on your slides, no one will ever listen to you. They will simply ask for a copy of the presentation, and it will be perceived as a complete waste of time. So to that point, and similar to what actually all of us did for today's presentation, where what's written on the slide is just the core message to remind us of what it is that we want to make sure to talk about, but it's not necessarily, it's not a read-along, it's not story time. So I think it's great advice, and I appreciate it. All right, Steve, you ready? You're up.
I was born ready.
It's all yours.
Okay, can everybody see? Are they looking at my slides now?
We see your screen, yep.
All right, awesome, thanks. So, my name's Steve Mullis, Salesforce MVP, like Josh and Jody. You know, thanks for nothing, Dave, making me follow those two guys. But I just want to share some of my presentation techniques that I've used over the years. If you're on the previous call, you may know that I have a little bit of experience prior to becoming a Salesforce admin. I kind of toyed around with doing stand-up comedy in and around Boston. And a lot of that, and the reason why I got into stand-up comedy was actually to try and overcome severe social anxiety. Like, I didn't not just hate speaking in front of people, I just felt uncomfortable being in a room full of people, never mind having to talk in front of them. So I learned some things, you know, from doing stand-up that I've kind of used over the years whenever I've had to speak publicly, especially doing presentations at Dreamforce or local user groups or the Dreaming events. And I apply them when I'm building my content and, you know, writing out my talking notes and assembling my slides and stuff like that. First of all, whenever building my content, I try to pick stuff that is real, relevant, relatable, and also repeatable. You know, really one of the best pieces of advice I got back when I was doing stand-up comedy, and it applies to any kind of public speaking, Dreamforce, user groups, or anything like that, is, you know, try to tell a story that is real, something that you really did, you really experienced, an app that you really built on the platform, a technology that you really deployed in your Salesforce org. Because when you do that, when you tell a story that's real and relevant and relatable, it's going to resonate with the audience. A comic told me one time that you can have a really cool joke about a priest, a rabbi, a nun, and a duck walking into a bar, but unless that really happened to you or really happened to somebody in the audience, it's not going to resonate the way that a really funny story, a really funny thing that happened to you or interesting thing that happened to you did. And you can take a real story and embellish it and elaborate on it for comedic effect or dramatic effect. So you can take, the story of a project that you worked on or an implementation that you did and maybe embellish things here and there for a little bit of comedy or drama. But if you're speaking from the heart and speaking from something that you've really done, it's really, really going to resonate with the audience. And with that in mind, when you are assembling content, you really want to avoid doing stuff like this. These are actually 2 slides from a presentation I did at Dreamforce a long, long time ago, and these are the slides that I used. And I was showing a formula that I built for someone who had a very, very specific need. They were trying to calculate the amount of time that had lapsed and was remaining within the current month in business days so that they could do prorated invoicing. And I made the mistake of presenting this formula at Dreamforce because I was so proud of it. It was hands down one of the most difficult formulas I'd ever written. And so I presented it, and then the more I thought about it, I was watching the Dreamforce videos after they got posted. The more I thought about it, it was like, this formula probably resonated with less than 1% of the people in that audience. Like, how many people in that audience of 500, 600, 700 people really need to do prorated invoicing in business days? Probably less than 1%. So I've never presented this formula again, no matter how proud as I am of this formula when I wrote it. I've never presented this formula again because I don't want to bore the 99.9% of the rest of the audience that have no use for this and never will have a use for this. So I try to pick material that is relevant and resonates. And so with that in mind, I was at a MVP event a few years ago, and I saw Peter Coffey speak, and he was doing a presentation on overcoming resistance to change and progress. And so he was doing this presentation, and he had one slide in his whole presentation, and this was his slide. And he didn't explain what the X or Y axis were. He kind of went around the room and let people guess what the X-axis was and the Y-axis was. And after a little while, people got what the Y-axis was. The Y-axis is time. I don't know if anybody really got what the X-axis was. I think Pete had to tell everybody at the end what the X and Y-axis were. And what this was, it was a chart that he made. He didn't experiment at home. He told the story of how he didn't experiment in his house one day. He said he's got this, in his kitchen, he's got this Viking stove. If you're a food geek or a cooking geek like me, a Viking stove is like the Rolls Royce of stoves. They're the absolute top of the line. And so he's telling everybody about how he's got this, like, in his new kitchen, he's got this really great stove. And so he decided to do an experiment. He took a pot of water, filled and put it in the freezer, froze it, then he put it on his brand new Viking stove, and he put it on the biggest burner he had, and he turned that thing up to full blast. And he timed how long it would take to boil that ice. And so the Y-axis is time, and the X-axis is temperature, from freezing to boiling. and he's telling the story, and what he's trying to, and so he mentioned, like, so he asked people, so what do you think happened at that last moment when when that line finally started to move upwards? What happened when there was finally progress in boiling that ice? And that moment was the moment that the ice melted. And when he said that, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I mean, it was just, to me, such a brilliant analogy of how that last little bit of ice was resistance to progress, resistance to change. And that was like 4 or 5 years ago. I saw that presentation, and I will never forget that presentation and that one slide that he used. And I've taken that to heart when I try to assemble content for any kind of whether it's Dreamforce or a user group, you know, that storytelling that, you know, I got the sense that, like, if Pete had forgot his USB drive that the PowerPoint was on, or his PowerPoint had crashed, or the monitor had frozen, or something like that, he would have been able to tell that story from beginning to end without missing a beat, because he really did that. He really did try to boil ice and time it and find out how long it would take, and realize that until the ice finally melted, that there would be no progress. And so that's, you know, one of the strategies that I use when I'm assembling my content and trying to figure out, like, you know, the story that I'm going to tell when I'm doing a presentation, and trying to, you know, again, trying to craft a story that is real and that resonates with the audience and is relevant to the topic. And, you know, touching on some of Jody's points at the end, you know, about you know, getting feedback from the audience, and, like, you know, looking at those people in the audience who are connected with you and things like that, and you know, recording yourself and things of that nature. One of the things that I always do, as soon as Dreamforce is over and the session videos are posted, I go back and I watch my sessions. I critique myself. I want to know every time, you know, that I stumbled for words, how many ums and ahs I had, or you know, looking at the presentation and, you know, trying to figure out, like, did I really need a slide for that? Did I really need 5 slides? Could I drop by with 3? Or should I have really had a slide that had a different screenshot on it, or maybe some different verbiage on it? Things like that. Another thing, especially with Dreamforce, because you have so much information available to you after the sessions wrap up. You've got your videos are available on YouTube to rewatch and learn from, but also the session feedback, and not just the scores. I go through the survey results, what people had to say about the session, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they would have liked to have seen. But also, with that in mind, you know, you also have to realize that, you know, especially with a large group and some of the sessions you'll have at Dreamforce, or like a large event, like a Dreamin' event, you're not going to be able to please everyone. I mean, in the same sessions where I've gotten really good feedback scores, in the feedback results, I'll see negative comments on both ends of the spectrum. The session was too simple, I didn't learn anything, or the session was way over my head. So, you know, definitely read the feedbacks, but, you know, but don't beat yourself up. You're not going to be able to please all the people all the time. So that's all I have, and I'll bring it back to David.
Thank you, Steve. Let me make myself presenter. I do have one question for you, which is, so you gave a great example of having, like, the formula, all the code that you wanted to share. Here, I'll put it up on my screen. All of the the whole formula field, or it could be in many scenarios. It could be Apex, or lots of technical details that might be related to. It might not be the core of necessarily the message that you're trying to give, unless it's a technical training session where we're walking through every bracket and every if case statement. But the question is, when it is appropriate or relevant to share those details but not having it in the core of the slide, what's your comfort level or advice as it relates to either including it in the appendix or simply making it available to folks who ask for it?
So this slide actually did change the way that I do my especially formula-based presentations, which is the vast majority of my presentations. I mean, I'm a formula geek, and that's 99% of the sessions that I present. But with this is a perfect example of something that is just too complex. I mean, to have on even 3 or 4 slides. It's just too big a formula and too niche a formula. What I usually do is, because a lot of my formulas do come from a question that was posted on the answer community, I do try to have, if I can find the original question, I do try to have it a slide with the question on there and a brief breakdown of what the problem was, and maybe if it's a deep formula session, I'll call out the specific functions that I use to solve it and things like that. And I will have the formula on its own slide, so it's big and bold. But I also, if the formula is not something that I can fit on a single slide in a big, bold, like 30-plus point font, so that everybody in that room can see it, and it's a clear enough formula that I can, in a few minutes, step through it, what I am doing in that formula, what that function. If I can't do that, I tuck that formula. That's a formula that's not going to make the cut in one of my presentations. This formula really was a learning experience for me. This formula, it's like this formula is at one end of the spectrum. This is like probably like one of the, I should have never shown this. I should have never presented this formula. And then seeing Peter Coffey with that one brilliant line chart. That was it. I mean, he had one slide, but the whole time he's telling the story of his experiment and how it related to eliminating the opposition to progress. And it just, with one slide, he just drove home the entire story. It was like the exclamation point to the end of his story. And he's talking about his experiment, and I just I'm telling you, everybody was on the edge of their seat listening to him. I mean, well, Peter's just an engaging speaker to begin with, but so when it comes to if you do have to present technical content, I definitely do try to present the problem first, and then walk through if it does depend on a formula or process builder or something like a workflow rule. I do try to have screenshots that are relevant to what I built, but again, I try to make those screenshots or that code as as cut and dry as possible. I would say that if sometimes sometimes you're being asked to present something that is very deep and multi-step. I would, if you can't fit the whole thing on one slide, then break it into sections and put each one on the slide, but so that you can highlight on that slide exactly, so that you want to be able to tell the story of what is going on in that one slide. And looking at this formula in the screenshot you're showing right now, to tell that story, I'd be up here for half an hour, 45 minutes.
Right.
Steve, that's a great recommendation. Another thing that I've seen folks do is not present the wordy slides and put those in appendix and post them on SlideShare. And then one of the things that developers do a lot is they'll actually put the assets that they want to show actually on their personal GitHub account so that anyone can go look at it after presentation. So I think those two ways are super helpful for circulating content that may be too technical and not make the cut for presentations.
Yeah, great point.
Yep. Good advice all around.
Oh, and one thing, just a quick note about that slide. So when I do presentations now, I don't expect someone to read all the wording of the question that the person posted. So I do try to have a synopsis of what the whole question was about, boiled down into like 1 or 2 sentences at the very most.
Yeah, I think having the question, that is a brilliant piece of advice. Having the question that was posed, or the business scenario, the challenge that was introduced, which was a catalyst to solving the problem, the solution that you're presenting. I think it brings everyone to the same page instantly. Whether you have a problem like that or not. Okay, this is the problem that was presented, and now we're going to walk through the solution. So I think that's great advice. I'm just looking to see, before we wrap it up, just looking to see if there are any other questions. Looks like we've addressed all of the questions that have come in so far. And if you're not familiar with using the GoToWebinar control panel in the question section, you can go ahead and post a question that I can read out to whether it's Steve or any of the other panelists. And if there's nothing else, we're going to wrap it up. So, Phil,
I'm here.
There you go. It's all yours. Bring it home.
All right, go back one slide if you don't mind. All right, so this has been a 4-part series, something we have never done before. I think it was pretty awesome. It was very cool to hear some guest speakers, and if you guys don't recall how this came about or how the speakers were chosen, it was from you guys being the MVPs. So I was really excited that you guys participated, being other MVPs, and brought in some awesome speakers who have a lot of experience, and I mean, lots of different tips. These are all recorded, so I'll reshare all the links with everyone. I just want to thank you to all the guests, all the hosts, and next year we can definitely do something like this. And next time, we've done the internal MVP version. This time we can open it up and maybe make it something bigger for the overall Salesforce community. So thank you, everyone. And if you want to go to the next slide, just some information. If you guys are interested in getting more involved with the presentation team, just hit me up. There's my information. So thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. And I think that's a wrap. Have a great rest of your day. Oh, and if you don't mind, just go to this link if you're still on, or you happen to see this, and I'll share this out. Just provide your feedback, just really quickly. That would help me out and help out the hosts and speakers. So bit.ly/MVP webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.